Hello CS25. In this video, I'm going to talk about Unit 1, Content, Materials, and Lecture. So in this week, we are going to cover mobile devices and laptop. You will find the first page in the Unit 1 module, which is the objectives and tasks. Each module will always have a page like this. So in this week, we are going to look at hardware components in a laptop, how to use some of the features in a laptop. We are going to look at mobile devices, looking at ports in the mobile devices, how to use the basic networking settings in the mobile devices, and to set up synchronization and application on the mobile devices. So you are to read Chapter 1 in the book, review the notes, watch this lecture video, complete Unit 1 assignment while you're watching the video. In the lab for this week, starting the first day of lab, we are going to do Lab 1-1, and there will be an extra credit opportunity during the lab. So if you are joining us from Zoom or on site, you will be able to accomplish that. Also, there will be a Lab 1-2. I forgot to include here, but you need to also post self-introduction discussion thread for this week. So when we click the next tab here, we are going to be able to view our notes. And as I go through the notes, I will break it up into different areas, so that way you are going to be able to follow along and the video won't be as long. And some part of the video, we are going to address the assignment questions, so it will be best if you have your assignment document open. Chapter 1 notes. You can find this on the Canvas page and download it if you wish, or you can view it within the page. So this chapter is going to cover the Core 1 Objective 1.1 to 1.7. And it's going to go over laptop hardware, installation of components, looking at display and appropriate features on a laptop, looking at ports for mobile devices, connection for mobile devices, networking connectivity on the settings and the applications, and then synchronizing the mobile devices. So with the installation of the laptop hardware, we will touch a little bit more on this and doing some hands-on activity with the actual laptop in our lab. But for the components, we are mainly looking at storage devices, could be external or optical device, also system board, memory, processor, and other components. And so when you work with installing or in troubleshooting these devices on the laptop, it's slightly different than the desktop. Now, sometimes you will be replacing something like the screen, keyboard, wireless adapter, or even RAM for RAM upgrade or processor. And other times you might be replacing a battery. Some battery is detachable, some battery is actually built into the laptop where you have to open up the back case or the back cover of the laptop in order to access it. So a laptop is going to be powered by battery, so it's very important that you turn off the power, unplug the charger, detach the battery before you open the inside of the laptop. Now, some universal battery might not be working 100% with your laptop. However, you want to refer to the documentation of the laptop if you are replacing the battery and making sure that that battery is going to be matching with the model of the laptop that you're using. Some laptop will have specific unique components, and depending on the model. So when you go from one model to the next model, sometime that you would see that they are different. For example, if you have one Dell model compared to a newer Dell model, you would see that the layout of the physical system for the connectivity in these components are slightly different. But you will still have the major components like keyboard, touchpad, processor, RAM, etc. But the layout for the overall is slightly different. How it's integrated will be a little different. There are some different features as well. So here are some of the best practices. Before you start opening up a laptop, you want to look at documentation. The documentation can be found from manufacturing websites. So if you're working with an HP laptop, you want to go to HP website, look for that particular model, and then you'll be able to view the manual or the documentation. Why do we need to do that? We can actually find information about how everything is enclosed inside the case, the type of screws it's using, the screw length, so that way we will know what kind of tool we need to use, all the components that will go into it, the specifications for the hardware. So the first part is to look at the manufacturer documentation or manual. And then after that, we would then identify the type of tools that we would use. So in the lab, I will introduce you to some toolkit. You might have some toolkit at home already that you can use. So the majority of the time we would use screwdrivers, and we don't want to use magnetic screwdriver. We use screwdriver that's non-magnetic, even though magnetic is very easy to handle, but you don't want to short your system board or your components when you touch it with your screwdriver tip. You also want to be able to identify the components and the areas of each of the components. So as you go, you want to really write down, or I would take my smartphone and take a picture of the laptop before I open it, and as I open it, I wanted to take a picture of it so I would know how to go back and reinstall everything once I'm done. So we want to label and document. You can use something like Post-it note for label. You want to be able to keep the screws in a certain screw container. We want to organize the parts and making sure that it is in an appropriate area. So when you're working with computer components, you want to use anti-static wrist strap. We will be looking at those, and we also want to use anti-static mats. So when we take out the components, if you don't have like an anti-static bag, you can also place it on the mats. A good way to also is to ground yourself. So touch something metal and make sure that you're on bare floor. When you're working with carpeted area, that can also cause static electricity. So making sure that you ground yourself before you start touching the components. So here gives us the layout of the laptop from the back, how the cover would look like, and this is an older laptop. So you have the battery, right? So down here, it will give you the appropriate identification for each of the label. So now, will you be able to find the hard disk in the exact area in different laptops? No, right? So that's why we need to make sure that we check our manual. And most laptops will have a panel where it would allow you to access RAM, because most people would upgrade RAM for their laptop. And so in this one, you can see that this is the cover for the RAM. And for the laptop, It used small outline dual inline memory module. It's a little bit different than the desktop in that it uses SODIMM. And also this laptop has a battery that is detachable here. So likely that you will have a glider or a button that will be able to detach. That will be called ejector switch. But make sure that we unplug, shut it down, unplug so we can drain the battery. Detach the battery before you start opening the cover. On this laptop, there's also a panel where you can access CMOS, and we'll talk about this later on. CMOS stands for complementary metal oxide semiconductor, and it is like a watch battery. It's flat, round. It's used to store power cycle for your ROM, which is used for your BIOS or your setup information for all the hardware components. So before the computer starts, it needs to look at which hardware is connected, and that power cycle is used to be able to identify the components that are connected for the basic setup. So once we open the cover, it would look something like this. Here you have the hard disk for storage, and for a laptop it uses the 2.5-inch. It's flatter, it's smaller than your regular desktop. Newer laptop would use solid state drive along with hard disk drive or just solid state drive, and that would look more like a memory module. And so this is the SODIMM right here, which is for RAM, for memory. Okay, so you can refer to the label, you can take a look at that, and we'll do some exercise related to this in the lab. Talk about the keyboard on the laptop. So laptop keyboard is different than your desktop keyboard, of course, but you would see that some of them you would have to remove the top cover completely in order to detach. Okay, some of them you would have to open up, and some of them would be connected to a hinge that would be somewhat tied to the top panel, which is the screen. Now, the laptop touchpad would be separate from the actual keyboard itself. The older one would have a pointing stick with the 2 buttons, where now you just have the touchpad for the modern laptop. So here it shows you the older style keyboard on a laptop with the touchpad. Okay, you would have a pointing button, and then you would have the 2 buttons options here. They now remove a lot of these options. We just have a regular touchpad where we would be able to press on the touchpad itself and then be able to slide our finger across the touchpad. So here it shows you the round blue button is a pointing stick, and then you would have some options with the buttons on an older laptop here, and also the touchpad. So to replace the keyboard, we would first turn the system off, remove the power connection, which is the charging cable to your battery. We would detach the battery. Okay, the reason why we need to remove the power cable is we need to drain the battery, and then we would need to remove the battery. And then you are going to remove the screws that hold the keyboard in place. So then we would need to turn the laptop upright, open the screen. So on this particular model, keep in mind that it's through the specific model, open the screen so that the keyboard is visible. Okay. Now, when you're working on the computer, make sure you have the tools available with the flashlight. And if it's necessary, we would remove the bezel that would hold the keyboard in place. And so when you are doing the lab this week, if you're on site, you can take a look at how you can remove the keyboard on some of the laptops I have available. So you would see that it would have a ribbon. It looks like a film ribbon that's going to be attaching, it's about like an inch wide. That's going to be attaching to the keyboard to the actual system board. And so when you remove the keyboard, you need to detach that particular cable. And so the cable is usually held down so that way it would keep the keyboard in place. And so when you disconnect the keyboard, you need to disconnect the cable. Okay, so here's a picture of that. And so when do people actually replace the keyboard? Well, maybe there are missing buttons, or when the keyboard is malfunctioning. Usually it relates to the physical issues where the buttons is missing or where it's not working anymore. So you will need to replace the keyboard. And you want to make sure that you research the model before you install. Okay. So right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to our assignment. We're going to go ahead and answer the question. The first question asks you, when repairing a malfunctioning keyboard on a laptop, what is the first step in keyboard removal procedure? The first step in removing any components on a laptop is to disconnect the laptop from the AC power, which is your charging cable. Remove the battery and make sure there's no power so you don't get shock or hurt. That will be the first step before we start removing everything else. Okay. So the answer to that is disconnect the laptop from AC power and remove the battery. Next, we're going to talk about hard drive or storage drive. So most laptops uses 2.5-inch storage drive. They are flat, they're smaller than your regular desktop drive. And there are different types of drive. There are hard disk drive, which stands for it's HDD. There's solid state drive, that's going to be SSD. And then there's the hybrid, which is the mix. So here it talks about hard disk drive as a magnetic disk. And we will dive a little bit deeper in the storage drive later on. But the storage is important because the size is going to tell us how many files or how much storage we can have in our system, including the operating system. So operating system uses storage. It uses hard disk or solid state drive along with RAM. And if you want to have a lot of files like pictures, videos, homework documents, etc., you want to have a good size, a large enough capacity on your drive. So the hard disk drive, it uses magnetic disk and it would spin. There's a read and write head. It has a mechanical movement. These are older. It's been around for a long time. There's different technology, but the current technology uses SATA, SATA 3. And with the magnetic disk, it's going to move, and moving parts that might cause some mechanical issues when it has wear and tear. It won't be as reliable as a solid state, which is another type. So the next type is solid state drive. It's quicker. There's no moving parts. It looks like a RAM module. It's faster. This should be used for operating system installation. Now, because of the way that we have abundantly available now, solid state drive is more affordable. So you can find different type of solid state drive. A popular type is the M.2, and that would be attaching to a specific connection type that is labeled or classified, standardized as M.2. So the important part about drive is to make sure that you understand the type of drives that you have in your laptop if you need to replace or upgrade. Okay. Then you have the solid state hybrid drive. That is going to be magnetic capacity along with solid state technology. So it's a little bit faster than your regular hard disk drive, but it will be slower than your regular solid state. So here it gives you a table and the analysis on different types of drive, okay, and the speed and the reliability, so you can have comparison. And everybody on the system, everybody use some kind of storage in order to store your files, personal files, or even run operating systems. So drives is very important. And to install the drive or upgrade, remove the drive, here are the steps. First, of course, we want to disconnect the power and remove the battery on the laptop. We would then unscrew the bottom part of the laptop cover, open that, remove the screws. Then we want to slide out the cover, and we should just be able to see the drive that's being screwed into the hole if we're looking at the hard disk drive. Then we would then be able to unscrew the screw on the drive frame and then remove the drive. We would put in the new drive, install the screw, put the cover back on, put the screw on the cover, put the battery in, plug in the AC adapter, and you are in business. But we need to also reconfigure, making sure that that drive is recognized by the system. So here is an image where you would see that there is screw on the frame. So when you replace the drive, you got to unscrew this first to take the old drive out, and then put the new drive in. You're going to screw that in place. Okay. So in the assignment for the second question, it asks you what type of hard drive delivers the best performance in a laptop, and that will be your solid state drive. We will take a look at some of the additional solid state drive when we get to the chapter where we talk about configuration, drive, and OS. So solid state, your SSD is the best technology at this time. So here's an image of how the drive would look like on the outside. And when you take a look at this is a hard disk drive, HDD. The data connection is located here, okay? And it would, when you look at that, that will be an L-shaped connection. It looks like an L. So that, this SATA connection is for data. Right adjacent to it, this is going to be for power. So just like any component in the system, we need to make sure that it has power. So when you plug the drive in, make sure that it has the data connection and the power connection. So for this now, I'm going to conclude the part 1 of the video. So in this part 1 video, we talked about laptop best practices. We talked about how to be able to open up our laptop safely, looking at your hard drive, different types of hard drive. And so in the next part, we're going to talk about RAM. So thank you for watching the part 1 video.